Once upon a time there was a king who had 12 beautiful daughters. They all lived in the same room and slept side by side. Every night when the king went to bed, he would close the door and lock it. In the morning he would discover that his daughter's shoes had been worn out. The king was puzzled by this and decided to announce a challenge. Anyone who could find out where his daughters were dancing could marry one of them and become the next king after his death. However, if the person failed to find out the secret in 3 days, their head would be cut off. Soon a prince volunteered to take on this difficult task. He was welcomed, and in the evening he was taken to a room next to the princess's sleeping chamber. A bed had been prepared for him, and he was to watch where the princesses went and what they did, so that they couldn't do anything secretly or leave the hall. The doors to the hall had been left open, but suddenly the prince's eyes grew heavy, and he fell asleep. When he woke up the next morning, all the 12 princesses had disappeared. Their shoes were still in the hall, with holes in the soles. On the second and third evenings the same thing happened, and so the king's son lost his head without mercy. Many others tried to take up the task, but all paid with their lives. And so it came to pass that a poor soldier, wounded and unable to serve, made his way to the city where the king resided. On the way, an old woman encountered him and asked where he was heading. "I'm not sure," the soldier replied, adding jokingly, "but I have a hunch that I might find out where princesses step when they dance, and maybe become king." "That's not so difficult," the old woman replied. "Just don't drink any wine tonight and pretend to fall asleep." She then gave him a small cloak and instructed him to put it on if he wanted to become invisible and sneak in after the 12 princesses. The soldier, after receiving good advice, decided to undertake this task. He gained the courage to appear before the king as a suitor. He was welcomed like the others and was also given royal robes. In the evening, when it was time for bed, they led him to a room adjacent to the royal bedchamber. As he was about to retire for the night, the eldest princess approached him with a goblet of wine. However, he had tied a sponge to his chin, and the wine spilled all over it, leaving not a drop in the goblet. He then went to bed and pretended to sleep deeply. When the 12 queens heard his snoring, they laughed. The eldest one said, "And it would do well to spare your life." They then rose, opened cupboards and caskets, and took out beautiful dresses. They began to dress in front of the mirrors and express their joy at the prospect of dancing again. One of them, however, the youngest one, said, "But we must not forget our promise." They quickly returned to their rooms, where they prepared themselves for the dance. "I don't know, but I feel heavy in my heart. Something bad must happen to us." "You're so scared, my dear," said the eldest to her. "You're always frightened of everything. Have you forgotten how many princes have come here in vain before? I wouldn't even give sleeping potion to that soldier. He wouldn't wake up anyway." When the princesses were ready, they looked at the sleeping soldier, but he didn't move. They thought that they had nothing to fear now. The eldest approached his bed and knocked on it, and immediately it lowered into the dungeon. They went down one by one through an underground passage, with the eldest leading the way. The soldier, seeing everything, didn't hesitate. He threw his cloak over himself and followed the youngest princess. In the middle of the staircase he accidentally stepped on her dress. She was scared and screamed, "Who grabbed my dress?" "Don't worry," said the oldest, "you're the one who's caught up in it." So they all walked down to the alley, where the leaves on the trees were sparkling with silver. The soldier wanted to take something to prove it, so he broke a branch off a tree. Suddenly a loud crack echoed through the air. The youngest one screamed. "What was that?" The oldest one replied, "It's a sign of our joy that will soon free the princes from their spell." And then they continued down another alleyway, where the leaves on the trees were all gold, and finally to a third alley, where the leaves were made of pure diamonds. The soldier broke off a branch from each tree, and each time the tree crackled, and the younger one trembled with fear. But the older one insisted that it was a sign of happiness. They continued on, and eventually came to a large river. There were 12 boats waiting by the shore, each with a beautiful prince in it, waiting for their respective queens. The soldier placed the princess in each boat, and sat down with the youngest one. The prince said, "Why is my boat suddenly so heavy today? I'll have to row as hard as I can." "Maybe it's just the hot weather," the younger one replied. "Or maybe something's just bothering you today." And there was a beautiful castle on the other side of the river, with cheerful music and trumpets playing. The princes swam over to the castle and entered, each dancing with their sweetheart. A soldier also joined them, dancing with them but invisible to everyone. One of the queens offered a goblet of wine to the soldier, but he drank it all before she could even take a sip. The younger queen was frightened, but the older one insisted that they continue to dance. They danced until 3 o'clock in the morning, when their shoes were all worn out from dancing. They had to leave the castle and go back across the river. This time the soldier boarded the boat with the eldest prince. On the other side they said goodbye and promised to return the next night. After they left, the soldier returned home and went to bed. And when the 12 queens slowly climbed the stairs, tired, he had already fallen asleep, snoring so loudly that everyone could hear. They said, "We have nothing to fear from this man," and took off their beautiful dresses, hiding them, and put their worn-out dancing shoes under the bed. Then they went to sleep. The next morning the soldier decided not to say anything, but to see this wonder again, so he went with them for the second and third night. Everything was the same. They danced until their shoes were worn out. But this time he brought a goblet as proof. When it was time for him to speak, he took the goblet and 3 branches with him and went to see the king. The 12 queens stood outside and listened to his words. When the king asked, "Where did my 12 daughters lose their dancing shoes?" the soldier replied, "They were worn out from dancing." With the 12 princes in the underground castle, the soldier told the king everything as it was and brought him signs of proof. The king then ordered his daughters to be summoned and asked them if the soldier was telling the truth. Seeing that everything had been revealed, and if they denied it, it would not help them anyway, they confessed everything. Then the king said, "Which one do you wish to marry?" He replied, "I am not young anymore, so give me the eldest one." The wedding took place that same day, with the soldier promised the eldest daughter after the king's death and the entire kingdom. And the princes were enchanted once again for as many days as they had danced with the 12 princesses for nights.